Introduce briefly our keynote speaker for tonight, Professor Hillel Cohen. It's a great honor to have him here at SOAS and in the conference. So Hillel is a professor in the Department for Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies, and is also the head of the Cherik Center for the Study of Zionism, the State of Israel. And I think that kind of unique combination, somebody in the Department of Islam and Middle East that is chairing the Center for Zionism and the State of Israel, is something that probably was not possible, unthinkable 10 years ago in terms of the disciplinary divides between different fields and the idea of thinking of Israel and Zionism as part of the Middle East, which is interesting. I think on a personal note, I think in 2009 we were sitting having coffee and Hillel was before he got his job in the Hebrew University, and he told me, forget about academic jobs, that's something that was in the past, that's no longer happening. And since then we both have positions, maybe a kind of hopeful message to those of you who are in fractional position or in postdocs and temporary positions, something to look forward to. So Hillel is one of the most interesting and original thinkers and historians of Israel Palestine to come emerge in the last 15-20 years for several reasons. First is that he does not shy away from difficult issues and topics that many other people would not touch or would hesitate about dealing with in the kind of intensity that he does. And the other thing, he's not easily categorized. I remember colleagues of mine went to interview him in 2010 or something, and from Cambridge, and they came back quite confused. You know, what is he exactly? Is he a Zionist? Is he anti-Zionist? You know, he says things, and then he says things that seem to contradict. And I think that's one of his strengths, that you really have to listen to understand, and it's not something that you can pigeonhole very easily. Hillel published 5 books in Hebrew. 4 of them have been translated to English. The first was the only one that hasn't been translated is Present Absentees on Palestinian Refugees Inside Israel, which unfortunately wasn't translated. It's a good book. And the second book was Army of Shadows, which came out in English by University of California in 2008, which signaled the direction that Hillel was not only looking at Palestinian society as he was looking at first, but also at the Zionist society and the interaction between two. Army of Shadows dealt with the issue of Palestinian collaborators with Zionism in the pre-state period, an uncomfortable topic for both Israelis and Palestinians. For Palestinians, because it showed that a significant number of people were willing to accommodate these kind of connection with Zionists. And for the Zionist side, or the Israeli side, it showed not only the dirty tricks of Zionism as is tried before to fragment and divide the Arab Palestinian population, but also the fact that many of those who collaborated with Zionism actually were uprooted in 1948, and it didn't help them during the Nakba. The third book was Good Arabs, published in English in 2010, again at the University of California, on again continuing the theme of collaboration, but looking at Palestinians that remained in Israel after 48. The fourth was on the rise and fall of Arab Jerusalem, came out at Routledge in 2011, and the last one, named 1929, 0 year of the Israel-Palestine conflict, it came out in Brandeis in 2015, is really a masterpiece and one of the most important books, I think, on the Israel-Palestine conflict, dealing with a moment which is very charged and a violent moment that is very charged in the history of the conflict. and really shows the strength of the relational approach that Hillel uses, which looks together at the Jewish Zionist society and the Palestinian Arab society. And the argument of the relational historians is composed of two parts. One is that you can understand Jews only if you look at the relations between Jews and Arab Palestinians and so forth. And you can also understand Arab Palestinian society only if you look at the relation, conflict, cooperation, and so forth with Jews and later Israelis. And the second argument, the stronger argument, is that both societies came into being as a result of that engagement. So the conflict is not a result of having two different societies in Palestine, but rather two societies came out of the conflict as a result of the conflict. And I think 1929 shows this amazingly, the fact that significant Jewish communities in Palestine, which were not particularly Zionist, as a result of 1929, have no choice but to align themselves with the Zionist society. I think that what is interesting also about 1929 and here is that I think that touches on difficulty when you teach Israel-Palestine. It sometimes feels ritualistic. People know what they think, and they judge you from before you open your mouth, and they don't really listen. And it's a kind of a drama or kind of theater piece rather than actual intellectual engagement. So what the book does in order to break that and make us rethink that historical episode is to break up the linearity. It does not follow a linear process and focus on moments that are unknown and mix them all together. And that compels, I think, readers to think critically of what they think they know about 1929 and the conflict more generally. I'll end here to allow as much time for Hillel to speak. So the title of his talk tonight is Emotions and Narratives, Writing the History of Israel-Palestine. So
thank you very, very much, Yair. I'm delighted to be here, delighted and, of course, confused. And what I'll try to do today is to talk about what you see here about emotions and narratives. Emotions and narratives, this is due to my understanding, maybe it's banal, maybe it's trivial, maybe it's wrong, that everything that we do is based on our emotions. I mean, we have ideologies, we have sometimes religious feelings and so on, but in the very basic, we are driven by emotions. It is each of us as a person and also as political communities or nations. So I refer to emotions both as object of study, to study emotions, what people felt and why did they behave in a certain way, but emotions also, they are, and this is what I felt and realized when I wrote the book 1929, they can be used as tools for studying. I mean, if we look very, very carefully at our own emotions, we can understand history much better. So this is my argument, and I'll try to convince you or not in these two points. Now, why do I argue that people are motivated by emotions? Take, for example, nationalism. How we define nationalism? All these debates between Benedict Anderson and your guy from the LSE, Anthony Smith, and all these schools about nationalism, cultural, linguistic, history, modern phenomena, and so on and so forth. But I think if we really want to understand nationalism is very basic emotion. And the emotion is we do not want to be controlled by others. This is emotion. Or we are humiliated when our land is occupied by others. This is notion. This is emotion. And this is the basic of nationalism. Now, who is the we? When we try to ask ourselves, who is our we? It can be based on religion, on composition of religion and ethnic origin and territory, and so on and so forth. But the basic issue, the thing that makes people create national institutions, that makes people fight, that make people defend or offend, it is this notion that we are under attack, or our land is under attack. So nationalism is about emotion. We cannot understand, we cannot study anything without emotion. I cannot talk without emotion, but this is a different story. The same is about religious issues. I mean, what is religion? So we say, Shema Israel, hear, O Israel, or whatever the way it is translated, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. You should love your God. It's about love. It's about emotion. All the story is emotion. I mean, I know that some people, for them, emotion is not easy issue to touch. So they put, I don't know, rules and declarations and so on. But I think inside, within each of us, it is the emotion. So we have, of course, we have positive emotions and negative emotions. So the positive emotions, it's the love of God, the love of our country, the love of our community. Ahavat Israel, in our case, we are in Israel study, right? So Ahavat Israel, I think that Ahavat Israel, the love of Israel, and Jewish solidarity, they were the main forces in Jewish history in the 19th and 20th century, maybe also earlier. But for sure, this is the main component of Jewish identity for many, many years. Take, for example, the Ashkenazi-Mizrahi issue, or the Jews from European countries and Jews from the Muslim countries. So the establishment of Alliance, the network of schools that were established by European Jews in Arab countries. Why? This is a symbol of Jewish solidarity. And this is very important to understand it. Now we can also remember that Jewish solidarity is vis-à-vis the non-Jews. Within the Jews, we have also another issue, which is European superiority. But this is not important at the moment, because what is important at the moment is when we speak about Jewish-Arab relations or Jewish, non-Jewish relations, Jewish solidarity, Ahavat Israel, is very important to our understanding. We also have negative emotions, of course. Negative emotions, as I mentioned. Sorry for quoting psukim that I cannot translate, but I'll try. Elohim ba'u zarim nachalatecha. I mean, what does it mean? It is from Tehillim. I mean, foreigners came to your, not only to ours, to your country. This is awful. We cannot accept it. Tim'u et echal kodshecha. They... Exactly. The place of your temple. I mean, and what is the feeling? It's a feeling or emotion of humiliation. Now I know that some people say that Zionism is detach yourself from religion. I don't buy into it. It's really, I think, the most unserious argument that was ever heard about Zionism. Zionism is continuation of Judaism in a certain way, not in the best way, but in a certain and mainstream way. Okay, we'll of course come back to it in a couple of minutes. Now, narratives. When we speak about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, everybody knows that there are different narratives about the conflict. There are different narratives. And for me, you know, at the beginning it was very interesting. You have two important, the way we speak, important scholars. They write about the same event. They go to the same archives. They read the same files. Wow. They have totally different view and totally different narrative of what happened. For example, if you take the War of 1948, Plan Dalet. Many of you are familiar with Plan Dalet, some of you are not, so I just say a few words of it. Plan Dalet is the plan of the Haganah, what became later the IDF, from March 1948. And this plan was, we have the plan, okay? So when Walid Khalidi, the head of the Center for Palestine Studies, when he reads this plan, he says, this is blueprint for the evacuation of Palestinians from their villages and cities. It's very clear, because there is a permission to uproot villages and to burn them also, if necessary. If you take Sefer HaHagana of Dinur, or every Zionist, basic book, what is it about, Tochnit Daled? Tochnit Daled, Plan D, the subtitle is a plan for defending Jewish communities inside the areas that were designated to the Jews in the partition plan, and Jewish communities outside this border, because there were about 11, 12 Jewish settlements outside the partition plan, the Jewish designated areas. So it is the defensive plan. What's the point? So you can read the same, 90 clever people read this document, and some say, this is a story, it's about expelling the Arabs. No, this is about self-defense of Jews. Now, how come, that you read the same document and you have totally different understanding of it? So this is one example. I'll give you another example from 1929 that I studied not less than 1948. And in 1929, there is, for example, debate who was the first to kill, to murder in 1929. So if you take Palestinian narratives, Palestinian history books, they can tell you that the first person that was killed was Khalil Burhan al-Dajjani. Khalil Burhan al-Dajjani was a person who used to sell vegetables in Mea Shearim and the Bukhari neighborhood in Jerusalem. He came there on that Friday that the violence started, and he was killed. He was lynched by Jews. Now, there's no question that he was lynched by Jews. But now, for the Palestinians, yeah, he was the first victim. So what happened later in Jerusalem and what happened later in Hebron is a result of Jews killing Arabs. This story is not mentioned in the Israeli history books, in the Israeli textbooks. We don't study it in high school, but also not in other books of historians about this period. But if you ask Israeli Jews who studied according to Israeli curriculum, of course, the events of 1929 started because of the Arabs, because they just wanted all the time to kill Jews, and they had the opportunity to kill Jews. And you can see that they killed Jews in Hebron, they killed Jews in Tzfat, they killed Jews in Colonia, they killed Jews in other places around, in Tel Aviv and elsewhere. So how come? You have the evidence. You have everything. So what is the debate? So if we go again to Plan D and to 1948, for Walid Khalidi, he has in mind that the basic idea of Zionism is to evacuate the Arabs of Palestine. Because, he argues, you cannot establish a Jewish state in a populated country. So, and also, of course, they have other proofs to that it was very basic component in Zionist thinking. You know, and he knew, and maybe most of you know, for example, in the 1930s. So there was a plan to evacuate of the Jewish agency. And it's the Labour Party. We do not speak about, some marginal right-wing cycle. No, this is the mainstream of the Jewish agency. So the plan to evacuate the Jews of Iraq, and to bring them to Palestine, and to take the Arabs of Palestine and to send them and to resettle them, not forcefully, in Iraq. So this was a clear plan. The Jews of Baghdad published a huge article against it in the Jewish papers of Iraq. No, we live in Iraq. We are Iraqis. We don't want to come to we love Jerusalem, we love Eretz Israel, we will come to visit, but this is our country. So the Jews of Iraq didn't want it. Palestinian Arabs didn't want it, and these ideas were evaporated for 10 years, 15 years. So for Khalidi, of course, when he reads Plan D, it reminds him, it rings a bell. Yeah, this is what they wanted all the time. You read the Jewish state of Herzl, you read, where are the Arabs? So there are few Arabs, but most of them are not here. Where are they? So this is what Zionism is about. For Zionists, of course, it's totally different. The Zionist narrative, and you all know it, Zionist narrative is about we came to Palestine in order to establish our new Jew, to become new Jew, to be workers, to be farmers, not to be only bankers. We came here to live in peace with our neighbors. Not only to live in peace with our neighbors, to bring bless to the country. Look around, see how they glad that we are here. Until 1929, and also they continued after, this was one of the basic Zionist argument. We are here, everybody just benefit. Of course, I mean everybody, the Arabs of Palestine, they benefit from our presence here because we bring money, the economy is better, the health is better, the commerce is better, everything is better. So now they had to explain why the Arabs of Palestine resist. And the explanation, especially of the Labour Party, meaning David Ben-Gurion, Moshe Sharet, Ben Tzvi, the leadership, but all thinkers all around the Zionist left. They said, no, most of the Palestinian Arabs do not reject Zionism. They enjoy our presence, but the Effendis, the upper class, they don't like us because we bring ideas of social justice. And when we bring ideas of social justice, these people, meaning the Falahim and the workers, they might rebel against the Effendis, against the upper class. So this is why they fight against us. And this is this explanation also about the events of 1929. Moshe Sharet was one of the persons, Shertok, he was the head of the political department of the Jewish Agency, and he brought these ideas also to the public sphere by publishing it. But it was very, very, very common. So we have here, we have the self-image of the Zionist movement as bringing bless to the country, benefit everybody, and we have the Palestinian Arabs who say, no, you are wrong. Now it is very interesting because this idea that Zionism brings bless, this also Herzl wrote to Zionism al-Khalidi. Theodor Herzl received a letter from one of the prominent leaders of Jerusalem, we can say at the Jerusalem area, around the beginning of the, I don't remember the date, I'm sorry if it's somebody maybe remember. 1905. Yeah, maybe 1904. So Zionism al-Khalidi, it was at the last month of his life. So Zionism al-Khalidi wrote a letter to Herzl and he said, look, we understand that you have a strong emotional connection, an historical connection to this country, but we are sorry. This land is inhabited. You cannot establish your Jewish homeland here. We have a lot of empathy to your suffering in Europe, but you have to find somewhere else to settle. What Herzl replied was, look, don't worry, we will come here and you will benefit from our presence. So this idea was part of Jewish imagination and the self-image of Jews, which is very important for every nation to have a positive self-image. But again, if we take this debate about 48, about 29, about the benefit of Zionism, we can say the following. Usually, not always, usually the debates are not about facts. Of course, when one Jew is murdered, near Jaffa Gate and one Arab is murdered near Mea Shearim around 1 o'clock, so there will be debate who was the first, and nobody knows, actually. But generally speaking, the debate is not about fact. The debate or the contradictions between the Zionist narrative and the Palestinian narrative is not about facts. It's about two things. One is a framework. What is a framework? A framework by which we can understand the Zionist project. And the second is about causes. And I would add a third one, which is intentions. Intentions is related also to the framework. So the Palestinian framework is very simple. The Jews came here to establish a Jewish kingdom. This is the way they called it during the late Ottoman, early British period. And they are supported by the colonial power. We spoke yesterday about colonialism, right? They were supported by a colonial power, which is Britain. And they don't want Arabs here. And they will do everything that they can in order to evacuate the Arabs. So, if we speak about the emotions of the Arabs, if we come back to the question of emotions, so the main emotion was fear, Now, there is something very interesting, I think, which is about demography, and we tend to forget. Some people tell me it is irrelevant, but I'll let you hear and you decide for yourself. If we speak about the year 1917, in the year 1917, the whole Palestinian population in all the world was 600,000 people. This was the number of Palestinian Arabs. The number of Jews in 1917 was 12 million, meaning that Jews were 20 times as Arabs worldwide. By the way, today it's so. Then it was 1 to 20. Today it's 1 to 1.2. The relation between proportion between of Jews and Arabs. But at that time it was 20 to 1. Now it is true that at that time most Jews were not Zionist. But most Jews, even if they did not support actively Zionism or didn't want to come to Palestine or accepted what the rabbis told them that it is better to remain in the diaspora, or they felt that it is better to live in Baghdad than to live in Petah Tikva, and so on. But still, they all supported the Jewish issue in Palestine in one way or another. And this is an important point. Because non-Zionist Jews supported Zionism in many, many ways. In the mid-30s, the Zionist organization sent people to Baghdad. Sorry for Sami for speaking too much about Baghdad. Because there was a very rich Jewish community to Baghdad. So they told them, look, don't tell them that you collect money for Zionism. Tell them that you collect money for the Jewish people. And they gave a lot of money for the Jewish people. Because Zionism was a controversial word. But Jewish solidarity was a holy idea. And they said, okay, there are now Jews who came or escaped from Germany. We have to absorb them in Palestine. And they gave a lot of money. So we have these ideas at the time, and according to the Jewish narrative or the Zionist narrative, all this should have been done without harming the Palestinian Arabs. But for Palestinians, and again I mentioned that the Jews are 20 times the Arabs of Palestine in numbers, for them it was a threat, a real threat. Jerusalem lost its Muslim majority already in 1860, more or less. So they lost it. You know what does it mean for Palestinians to lose the Muslim majority in Jerusalem? Jerusalem is a place that all Palestinian nationalism, before there was Palestinian nationalism, Arab communities, Muslim communities in Palestine, they saw themselves as the defenders of this holy place. Since the Crusades onwards, and during the Mamluk period, and during the Ottoman period, this was their mission, to defend this holy place, Jerusalem and Hebron. And what happened? Jerusalem became a city with a Jewish majority. What can you do? What can you do when the Jews are supported by Britain? You can do nothing. You can do nothing. And you feel humiliated, and you feel under threat. And you are humiliated, and you are under threat. And people who say, then, Haj Amin al-Husseini, the Mufti of Jerusalem, when he says, Al-Aqsa in danger, Al-Aqsa fi khatar, like Sheikh Raed tells us today, Al-Aqsa fi khatar, he's not lying. Of course, Al-Aqsa is in danger. There is danger. Because, you know, I spoke a couple of months ago as a Hebrew, and I said, because Jews pray to rebuild the third temple, because the Jews believe in the idea of the third temple. So there was one person there with a kippah. He said, what are you talking about? We believe in the third temple. I said, did you pray today, Shacharit? He said, yeah. Did you pray for the third temple? He said, yeah. And you don't believe in it? He said, well, it depends. What it depends? It's true, it depends. Because some people believe if it comes from heaven. Yeah, if it comes from heaven, nice. I wouldn't reject it also. Because there is this, I mean, it's for many Jews, it can be built only if it comes from heaven without human intervention. It's not that it is a kind of imaginary. Yeah, this is one school of thought. This is one school of tradition. But there is another school of tradition of itaruta diltata, meaning that you have to work on the ground in order to achieve it. And some people believe in this one, and some people believe in this one. But Haj Amin, for him, it's not important. He doesn't know exactly the differences between Reb Alter Migur and Rabbi Kook. He doesn't know. No, it's not a joke, because maybe he should know. I tell you, why I say maybe he should know. Because when a bus in Jerusalem is blown up, I think it's very important to ask whether it was Hamas or Fatah or Islamic Jihad or PFLP. It is very important to know. And when Argov is shot at in 1992, it's very important to know if Arafat sends a person to shoot him or someone else.
82.
82.
1982.
1982, exactly. So it's not that it is not important. It's important to know, and important to know the different schools of thought and of action. But when you don't want to know, or you're afraid to know, you don't know. And you have the Jews, and you have the Arabs. So these emotions during the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s are very important to understand what happened. What happened. Now, how do we study emotions? How do we study emotions? How can we know, as historians, what people felt? Maybe we just throw on them our ideas. Sometimes we do. That's true. Sometimes we have good sources. Sometimes people write. Not memoirs, because this is later, but on real time. Sometimes political leaders, they give lectures, talks. We have in protocols. Very, very interesting. Moshe Shertok, then, a great mind and person with emotions. And a person who was connected to his emotions. This is very important because many of us feel, but they don't know what they feel. I'm serious, of course. And this is a problem, but we cannot deal with it now. Moshe Shertok, he gave wonderful lecture in 1940 about the Arab problem. Now, this is fascinating, of course. I mean, the Arab problem, when all Europe is about the Jewish problem. But he speaks about the Arab problem in 1940. And he speaks about the history of Zionism and the Arabs. Very, very interesting. He starts with criticizing himself or his circles. And he said, look, we all the time said that we are bringing benefit to the Arabs of Palestine. We look at them as they are only individuals who seek better life for themselves. But they are nation. And we ignored the fact that they are nation. He said something, you know, he was very clever. He said, look, tree cannot be only tree. He is either olive tree or, you know, names of trees, oren, or brosh, cider. Yeah, a tree cannot be only tree. He is part of something, a family of trees. He has another identity in addition to his being tree or it being tree, a tree. And this is the same he said for the Arabs of Palestine. They're not only human beings. They're human beings that who belong to certain communities, and they have certain ideas. Okay. So this is one thing that he said. And then he said, he didn't mention his mistake of 1929. Because in 1929 he said they went to the riots because the Mufti wanted to fundraise money in the Islamic world. So he sent them to riots. He understood that this is not true already. So he said, no, we understand that the struggle is a national struggle. And they feel that we are taking their land. And now we say something about Jewish feelings and Arab feelings. About Jewish feelings, he said, look, we build here a Jewish environment. We had Jewish environment sometimes also in the diaspora. We have at home Jewish environment. We lit Shabbat candles, and we spoke sometimes Hebrew. We sent some kids went to Tarbu, to Hebrew schools in Eastern Europe and so on and so forth. So there was Jewish environment. Sometimes there was a Jewish street with synagogue. But it was Jewish environment within a non-Jewish environment, and we were not responsible for ourselves. Then we came here to Eretz Israel. And in Eretz Israel, we managed to establish Jewish environment in certain areas. He said, there are a few areas in Emek Israel that you go from one place to another and you feel that you are in a Jewish environment. You have Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is a Jewish environment. He said it's ugly, the architects are not such good. But it's a Jewish environment. And he said, to walk in Tel Aviv is not the same like to walk in Jaffa Street in Jerusalem, because Jaffa Street in Jerusalem is full with Arabs. And the areas in the south is not like Jezreel Valley, because between each settlement you have 2, 3, 4 Arab villages. We do not feel at home. So the need to feel at home for him required that there will not be Arabs. It doesn't mean that he wanted to evacuate all the Arabs. But in 1948, in the cabinet meeting of 16 June 1948, page 17 is the protocol, he said, now, he gave the first briefing, 16 June. It's after the invasion of the Arab armies. It's just before, towards the truce, the first truce. And he said, we have now all the area, we have line without Arabs, from Tel Aviv to Romema. Romema is the most western neighborhood in Jerusalem. And Ben Gurion stopped him and said, no, until Talpiot, which is the most southern part of Jerusalem. And he said, maybe Baka, maybe Talbiya, they start to speak about neighborhood in Jerusalem. But for him, 20 years after 1929, 8 years after this lecture, for him, it was a fulfillment of the dream to feel at home, that you go from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and you do not see Arabs. Now, I do not argue that this was the driving force of Zionism, not to see Arabs. I say that this was when we look at the emotions. My argument about 1948, there is important debate about 1948. There are many debates about 48, but I think one of the debates is very important. The debate, which is irrelevant, what would have been, happened would have the Arabs accepted the partition plan. So Palestinian scholars, many of them, and others argue that even if the Palestinians would have accepted the partition plan, the Zionists, for them, they would have continued to occupy and to expel the Arabs from the rest of Palestine. Why can they argue this seriously? Why can they argue this seriously? Because of a letter of David Ben-Gurion from the partition plan of 1937, when he wrote to his son Amos, you know, if they would not let us to settle in the Negev was supposed to be part of the Arab state, if they would not let, we can use our power to do it. We are stronger than them. We have the right, because there are many Jews who need to find place. 1937. So we have the right to do it. So based on this, they argue this was the plan. Now, it is also true, and we know, that prominent leaders of the labor at that time, of the Haganah and of Mapai, they said similar things. When Zalman Shazar went from town to town to convince people to support the partition plan, he said, we do not give up anything. We do not give up anything. This is a stage, we are in a stage that we can achieve independence. So we take independence. It doesn't mean that we give up the Transjordan, he said. He didn't speak only on Judea and Samaria. We never give up Transjordan. It's true that this is a flag of Jabotinsky, but we didn't give it up. And the same is Galili. Galili said, he was the head of the Haganah. In 68, he was a member of the cabinet of Golda Meir. And he was asked about the settlement in the West Bank after 68, after 67. And he said, we never gave up the idea of settlement all over Eretz Israel. So they asked him about the partition, and he said, yeah, we agreed to the partition, but we didn't agree that we will not be allowed to settle there. This is Eretz Israel. When the current leader of Labour Party, Gabay, says, this is, all of it is our country because God promised it to us, he's serious. Maybe it is also true, I don't know. But he's serious. This is the legacy of mainstream Zionism. Now, when we look at it from Palestinian perspective, of course, when you have such, I mean, to speak about the Jews in the 40s as a huge nation, when we know what happened to our grandparents, I mean, there is something, you can say, not serious in it. You know, millions of Jews are massacred. And this is a great nation. But if you look into Palestine, it is the way that the Jewish issue in Palestine became stronger and stronger during the 40s, during the Arab Revolt of 36, 39, and then continuing its growth in the 40s. So you look at very strong people, because we are. I say we because I'm part of this nation, of course. We are very strong. We have a lot of power. Many kinds of power. Jewish solidarity is one of them. Maybe the most important. So now, I want to tell you something about the mythology of studying emotions. So I said we have sometimes lectures like the one of Chertok, which is very important. We have many, not only him, but he was when you find people with self-awareness, because he was also able to see the Arabs. He has a great story. He speaks. So and then I will say what I wanted. But this great story, he said, in 1924 I went abroad. I came back from Alexandria. I took the train from Alexandria in Egypt to Tel Aviv. In the train, there was a huge number of people who came from Poland, who came to Eretz Israel the first time in their lives. They made Aliyah. So we sat all of us in this train, and we sang, you know, we banu arza tu bnot ani banot. We sang the Zionist songs in the train. he tells us that in Zarnuga, near Gedera, an old Falah entered the cabin and looked around like that. And he says, and I looked at him, and I understood what he feels. He went to sleep in an Arab village and woke up in an Arab village and went to the mosque to pray the Fajr, the morning prayer. And he came to his train to go to an Arab town, to Jaffa, to sit in an Arab cafe and drink in an Arab cafe. And now he sees us in the cabin. He said, he said, Shertok, I look at the eyes and I understood what he feels. He knows now and he feels now that this country is going to be a Jewish country. And it's true. This is what he felt, and this is what happened. And Shertok was clever enough and sensitive enough to understand it. So we have these clues that we can collect from things that were written and told in the 20s, 30s, 40s during the British Mandate. And there is another tool that I use, and the another tool is what I mentioned earlier, which is to follow my own emotions. This happened to me, accidentally, of course. But I was open enough, if I may say, to follow it. And the point is to follow your notions when you read a document. For myself, I can say, when I read about killing of Jews by Arabs in Hebron, I cried. When I read about killings of Arabs by Jews, I was angry. I felt anger. I was angry. It's not the same emotion. It's not the same emotion, of course. It's totally different emotion. Of course, there was some pity there and some anger there, but you know the proportions. And I understood that this is very important to understand everything. What does it mean, everything? The only way for us to understand history, to understand history, is by my own feelings. It's not by reading history books, but what you feel when you are close to this history. Now, when I realized this difference, I understood, for example, that you do not need ministries of education in order to educate you to cry for fallen soldiers and not to remember Arabs who were killed. Because this is, I would say, the natural behavior. Naturally, you cry for your brothers and you don't cry for others. And now you just take it 10 times, 100 times, 8 million times to understand Israeli society of today. Now, maybe other people would react differently, and we will study them, and they will study themselves, and they would tell us. But I think that this is very, very basic. It's a basic in the sense that everything, and this was an important lesson for me, everything that I read it, I'm sorry for speaking like that, I read it from the heart, not only from here. And I follow what I feel. I never read any model of international relations. I don't know. I know that there are models of political sides. I know nothing. I didn't try to learn it. I did try to understand what I feel. And I try to, and this is also when I do ethnography, when I walk in the old city of Jerusalem, and when I walk in Issawiye, and when I walk in other places. What do I feel? And when I feel sorrow, and when I feel anger, and when I feel, humiliated, and I feel, sometimes of course. And in this way, it is, I think that I can understand the way Israeli society behaves, and in a different way, I can understand the Palestinians. Now, a word about it. I started to write or to collect materials on this book in 2008. And it was an evening in 2009, in January, reverse. Okay. I worked on totally different issue in the National Library in Jerusalem, and I opened the book of Mustafa Dabbar, Biladuna Filastin. It's a big lexicon about Palestine, and I read the chapter about Jaffa. And the chapter about Jaffa, because it's according to places. So the chapter about Jaffa, he wrote there, in 1929, a Jewish policeman entered house of Palestinian and he killed all the family, including the kids. I photocopied this page and I say, you see what is Oriental imagination? But I put it on my desk. This happened maybe in 2005, 2006. Two years later, I was in the Haganah archive and I found a document when a person speaks about this Jewish policeman and how he killed the family, and our family in Jaffa in 1929. And this person who wrote, he gave testimony to the Haganah archives. He tells them how he bribed the British Attorney General in order not to have life sentence, a death sentence to this person. So I said, wow, so it's a true story. When I said, wow, it's a true story, I understood that I believe to Jewish sources more than to Arab sources. Nice, good to know. So this was chapter 1. The same document I said, wow, what a surprising case. Jewish policemen kill whole Arab family. And then it was January 2009, and when it was cast-lead operation. I don't know if you remember, we had dinner, I got a phone call from Gaza, a friend of a friend. He tells me that the son of his sister is wounded on the street. There is fire. The IDF do not let them take her out. And there are few people there injured, bleeding. I called Physicians for Human Rights. I called the ICRC, the International Red Cross. There was a kind of operation room for the Red Cross and the IDF. They told me, I gave them the exact place. That's it. I didn't dare to call him to ask what happened. And in this operation, you know, there were few Palestinian families who were killed. Most of the families, parts of the families, many family members. And then I understood second lesson. The second lesson was that what is surprising for me, it's not surprising for a Palestinian. And the fact that a Jew kill a Palestinian family, that is surprise for me. For every Palestinian, this is the most natural event. I mean, you do not write home about. Yeah, they killed so many families, you know, throughout history. So you tell us about this family, okay. Because when I started to write, I thought to write actually another book about surprising documents. And then I shook my head and said, no, maybe documents that surprises naive Zionists. This should be the title of the book. So this was the second lesson. So since then I started to understand that in order to understand, to really understand, we have to be emotionally involved. If we are not, we can analyze the Palestinian resolution, I don't know, Palestinian National Charter, or to analyze Hamas charter, or whatever. We can analyze many things, but we don't understand. because the issue is emotional and the understanding should be emotional. Now, I don't say that this is true for everyone. I speak about myself, of course. And this was my second lesson. Now, I have time, I don't have time.
10 minutes.
10 minutes? 10 minutes, okay. So now I want to say something about colonialism because this is part of the discussion yesterday. And for me, because this is my attitude, I think all the discussion, whether Zionism is colonialism or not, is not important. It is not important discussion. Why it is not important discussion? Because if you want to say that Zionism is colonialism, you create a definition or you adopt a definition according to which Zionism is colonialism. If you want to prove that Zionism is not colonialism, you say another definition. For example, if you need, how you call it, patrie, you need
Mother country.
Yeah, mother country or not. Okay, it's very easy. Or if you say, if you speak Yiddish, you cannot be colonialist. So the Zionists are not colonialists. You find a way to say why, if you want to say we are, if you want to say we are not. My attitude is totally different. I say something different. I say, we are colonialists, of course, but when your people is in danger, when Hitler wants to kill 6 million Jews, be colonialist. Be colonialist. I mean, what's the problem? Of course, I mean, what can you say? If the colonial power is ready to help you to save million Jews, go with him. I mean, who can judge you? And I tell you, who can judge you? The people who pay the price for it, they can judge you. Okay? So, of course, for us, in our narrative, I don't think that it is, in our narrative, again, the Zionist narrative, or the Jewish narrative even. Because, look, it's very interesting. Why the Palestinian Communist Party split in 1939? Even a bit before. But in 1939, it became a final split. Because even the communist, anti-Zionist Jews, they cannot say that they support the Waqf al-Hijra, how you say, the stopping the Jewish immigration to Palestine. Because their uncles, their daughters sometimes, their grandmothers were in Europe. So they can say, okay, we are against Zionism, we are against everything, but what can you say? Again, Jewish solidarity and family solidarity, but it is the tribe. So if you look at it from this perspective, and this is the Zionist emotional narrative, from this perspective, what can you say? And again, from Palestinian perspective, you can say a lot. Because Palestinians pay the price for the anti-Semitism of European anti-Semitism, for European colonialism, they pay the price. So of course they have the right to resist it. It's not that they do not have the right to resist it. And it's not that the fact that we had to come to Eretz Israel in the 30s gives us right to have a Jewish state today. No. Nothing to do with the Jewish state today. Nothing to do with Jewish state today. It's totally different issues. And of course, if you are in the same, if you build this narrative in order to achieve political goals, you connect them. It doesn't mean that they are connected. It doesn't mean that they are connected. And so this is why the question about colonialism is not that important. I mean, it's nice for academic discourse, but it's not from again, from emotional Jewish perspective, it's unimportant. And because this is what's important, so now just about writing history on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, because it is here in the title, writing history. So I say a few words. Because of this emotional element in each of us, people connected to it more or less, but it is in each of us. We can see something very trivial, that most Jews, I mean, Jewish historians, Zionist historians, of course, they write history that support Zionism and explain why Zionism is fine and our right to this land and so on and so forth, which is fine. The interesting point, and this is very, very interesting point for me, is that the most radical, critical writers, Jews, I don't want to mention names, take the most, imagine the most, and more. None of them would suggest to undo the achievement of Zionism, meaning to take the 8 million Jews from Palestine and kick them out. So what is it about? I mean, all these debates among historians. Okay, I found another massacre. They found 2 massacres. I only 14. Okay, very nice. If we speak about the essence, none of them or none of us says that the Jews have not right to be in Palestine, in Eretz Israel. So the debate is about the arrangement between Jews and Arabs between the river and the Mediterranean Sea. But this is a victory of Zionism, that they succeeded to bring all the Jews to Eretz Israel, all the Jews that wanted, and that this is accepted by all Jews, Zionists or not Zionists. It's amazing. Now, for the Palestinians, it's not like that. For Palestinians, my kids, they went to the bilingual school, the Jewish Arab school in Jerusalem. Very funny school. They don't know neither Hebrew nor Arabic now, so they completed their mission. And I talk sometimes, I'm in this business of Jews and Arabs, so sometimes I'm invited to talk with teachers. So one time they told me about an event that was in class, 3rd class, so that a Jew boy is not a good word, a Jewish boy, right? A Jewish boy quarreled with an Arab boy, and then the Arab teacher came. It was nothing about politics, of course. It was about Balorot, but the Arab teacher told him, he said, if you are not satisfied, go back to Europe. It's great. I love it because for me, when I do this meeting with a group, we discuss it. It is very interesting because it's a very good material to understand how they understand the people who are most dedicated to Dukiyum, the coexistence, but the very basic idea in the mind that the Jews do not belong to Eretz Israel. It's a very basic idea. Of course, not for everybody, but it is very strong. I did a survey about that, by the way. The first time and last time that I did quantitative research. 400 students, Arabs. I mean, maybe 4 think that Jews have some. So I'll finish with that, with saying that the achievement of Zionism, that is, we can see it in the writing of history of Zionist and non-Zionist Jewish writers. It's a great achievement. At the same time, the emotions of the Palestinians that remain the same. Al-Aqsa is still in danger. The Jews are now stronger. They are not the numbers. I told you the differences. And the conflict is, in its beginning. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Hillel, for this really fascinating talk. We'll take some questions now. Let's collect questions, if I can. So.